Hello gamers, Power Heal here, and today we're going to be talking about Dire Maul. So this is going to be a loot video specifically for items that drop in Dire Maul, so it's not going to include things like Hide of the Wild where the pattern drops in here, but not the actual item. And we're basically just going to be going through things from a healer perspective, checking out the bosses in each wing, and talking about which items are good, which items aren't. This is probably going to be one of my, the only Dire Maul video. I might make one more on Padre's pants, specifically for the fact that they're just really, really good, right? And I would definitely want people to be aware that that item is inside Dire Maul. But other than that, this is going to be the go-to loot video. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about Dire Maul to begin with, why it's useful, and then we'll kind of go wing by wing and we'll look at the items. So basically, I like to think of Dire Maul as sort of like a mini Zul'Gurub, which basically means that it's kind of like a healer's paradise, but also not just in a Bis sense, but in a catch-up sense, right? So Dire Maul does have some really good pieces for healer, like, kind of like unironic Bis pieces in some cases for certain specs and classes, but it also has a lot of just kind of like normal, decent items for healers. So this is a really excellent instance if you have a fresh healer. It's still fantastic if you have a healer that's been 60 for a bit. I'm going to be in here on both of my priests, but the priest that I leveled, the second priest basically, like the weaker geared one, that one's obviously going to benefit a lot more because there's a lot of items I can pick up in here that are kind of just as good as other items in maybe other instances or slightly worse that kind of just do the job, right? So if you have a fresh healer, this is a perfect place to gear him out, and sometimes it saves you some of the leg room from having to travel to a lot of the other dungeons, right? Luckily, as healer, you don't really have that many dungeons to run to begin with. It's pretty much Dire Maul, and then BF Blacklock Depths is basically another one, and then Undead Strat. Those are most of what you're concerned with, right? And there's some other random pieces in other places, but let's get into it, and we'll kind of just go boss by boss. So start with the East Wing. This is like the easiest one. This is where you get the key. You basically do little quests, follow this imp around, and eventually, I think you actually have to like walk up to the imp and then he starts running, and you basically just follow him through the dungeon, and eventually he turns into like a quest mob or something, and you have to either kill him or somebody else, and you get the key from him. So that's really simple. Nothing else really notable on that boss. This boss right here, this is the boss for like the melee DPS bow, basically, that they all want. It's not really, there's nothing really great on this boss for healers. This is the best item of note, I would say, and it's kind of like only really decent if, you're super fresh on a leather or higher wear, so druid or shaman or paladin. But realistically, even the strat piece that we have, actually I think I have it on this character, so I can just show you. This piece that you get from the Stratham quest is just strictly better, right? So nothing crazy there. This is only for Shadow. Not bad for Shadow if you want some Shadow off-spec gloves. Nothing here is like really that good. You don't really want crit enough to be interested in this, to be honest. This is pretty decent if you're a leather wearer, I will say. It's probably got some of the higher plus healing you're going to get on boots. Doesn't have that strong intellect. I'm not sure if I would put it overall as like one of the best healing items. I think that an item from DM North boot-wise is, probably better. But it's very accessible because it's like the first boss of DM East, and DM East is like super easy to run in general. People do a lot of jump runs for this, which is where they'll kind of jump down and skip some of the bosses, but I think you have to kill this boss regardless. So, yeah, this is just a decent item for shamans and druids, obviously, and paladins. This boss is one of the bosses that people tend to skip. Interestingly enough, it does have an interesting staff. I think that this is, I would have to say it's probably better than the staff I'm currently using, which is the one from the Scarlet Crusade quest line, basically, where you kill, this is the one where you kill the boss of Strat Live, and then you kill the boss of, you do a quest for the Archivist, and then you kill the boss of Strat Live. He drops the head, you bring it to the camp, gives you a quest to kill Baron, get his head, you do that, and then you bring it back and you get a choice of weapons. This is one of them. Pretty strong weapon early on, but this is a very similar weapon. And if you don't feel like doing the long quest line, you can get this relatively easily. It doesn't have a great drop rate though, but like I said, this instance is really easy to do. And this boss is, I think, a little bit out of the way, but he's not super out of the way. So unless you're doing like jump runs or something, you can probably convince your group to kill him relatively easily. And yeah, the 8 mana per 5 is pretty decent for any class that can use staffs, which is basically all the healers, I think, except for Paladin. So definitely not that bad. Going on to the third boss here, or well, kind of like the third or fourth boss. There's one item here that really sticks out, which is the Whipvine Cord. Now, this is kind of an insanely statted item in my opinion. It's hyper well statted. It reminds me of other items in the instance that I'll get to. I just want to show you something really quick, actually. So keep in mind, it's 31 healing, 6 mana per 5, and 9 intellect, right? I'm going to show you an item from Blackwing Lair, which isn't even out yet, right? The Crutch. 35, this is damage and healing, keep in mind, but 35 damage and healing, 5 mana per 5, 12 int. So in terms of, like, healing, this item is just, like, basically the same as Fire Moss Clutch. You're basically getting a Blackwing Lair kind of level item in like a 5-man dungeon, which is insane when you think about it, right? So this is like the first item that's of like real note here, and you should definitely be trying to get this, in my opinion. Very strong item. Now, this is, you know, I think the only time you might not want to get this or focus on this is if you're going for the belt from Molten Core, the Prophecy belt, obviously, for like set bonus or something like that. As an individual item, I think this item stacks up really well against that belt, and I would definitely not buy the belt or use any loot prio on it at all if I could get this instead. So like on my alt, where I don't have the belt already, I'm not getting this. On my main, I already have the belt, and I'm probably going to keep using the belt just for like set bonus and stuff like that. However, depending on how much Prophecy I use, if I don't need the belt to use the 5-piece bonus on Priest, I may actually end up going back to this belt, because it is a very strong belt. Yeah, obviously just a little bit lacking on the int when compared to the Prophecy belt, but still hyper strong. Now, this item is like the next item that people will notice. Obviously, Priest can't get this, but this is really good for Shaman and Druid and Paladin. There is another item that's even has more healing on it than this, but I would so this becomes like kind of like the Druid quintessential item, because it's one of the best gloves they can get, and it's way easier to get this than getting the gloves off Princess, because nobody wants to run Princess, and it's a relatively long instance. These jump runs can be done in like 10-15 minutes, so there's not really like, these pretty much become the default Pre-Bis gloves for everybody that's not a priest, right? Because obviously they're leather, and the priest can't use the leather. So that's something to keep in mind there. Another notable item to look out for. And so this item is, it's pretty decent. I still prefer to have the staffs, especially given that you can give them kind of like a cheap +9 intellect, which is really helpful and not super expensive until you get like an actual good weapon, right? But this is obviously not bad at all. It's very similar to the Hammer of Grace, right? You're sacrificing 16, 17 healing for 5 int. They're about equivalent, in my opinion. It's nothing you really want to necessarily chase after, but this is another great item where, like, if you didn't have any main hand option, like if you're a fresh 60, again, something like this becomes really nice, because you just kind of pick up your weapon while you're picking up a bunch of other gear. So this one kind of falls into that category of, when you're just trying to scoop everything, right, on a new class. And this, in my opinion, is the most underrated item in here. 10 intellect is pretty decent for a ring, and the 6 mana per 5 on top of it is not so shabby. Also, the fact that the ring options are just not really that great at this point, right? Outside of the quest for the In Dreams ring, basically the Tyrian Forging one, most of the ring options are fairly mid, I think, and some of them can be a bit annoying to get. you have options like the one in LBRS, but that one has 29 healing, 6 mana per 5, but you don't have any intellect. So in a scenario where, you are able to remax your mana, right, I tend to prefer having the intellect. I almost always like to have intellect on all my pieces if I'm doing anything that's not like a speed run, raid-wise, right? So I might actually prefer this item to the other item. But in like a speed running case, obviously the other item would be better, right? And just to give you a reference, the item we're talking about is the, that's not him. Where is the item we're talking about? Right here. I think this doesn't have the updated, like where the items are. It's on one of the, yeah, this is the item we're talking about, but it actually drops off Voon in this version of the game, this particular patch. So this item is also very good. Like, this is a good, easy ring option to get with the In Dreams ring. But if you don't have those, or if you're in a situation where you prefer the intellect, this ring from Dire Maul East is not too bad. And it's also just another item, kind of like the rod here, where you can just easily snag this, and it's a workable item that you don't really have to replace, right? If you're on like an alt or something like that. Just going to check these really quick. Obviously, yeah, nothing really crazy here. That's for the tier 0.5, so that's not in yet. The books, we will make a specific thing on the class books, and yeah. Okay, so we'll go to Dire Maul West now. Now West is like I would say it's maybe the hardest instance. It's not really that hard though, so don't worry about it too much. But it probably has like the best loot for priest and probably a lot of just healers in general. Like, I would say that the combination of the pants here and the trinket are just bis for a lot of classes. So let's get right into it. This staff is like, it's actually not that bad if you do get it. It's very similar to my staff. It's 6 less intellect. It doesn't have the spirit on it, but the spirit on my staff is like only 6 spirit, so it's not very strong. And when you combine that with the fact that, we don't have 3-piece tier 2 yet, spirit's not all that great. So having like 1% spell crit is not terrible on an alternative. And the fact that you can put 9 intellect on this, like I said, is pretty good. So this is not a terrible option if you're very, very green, even though I think some of the other staff options might be a little bit better or close. And these options are not, this is like okay maybe for a healer, but realistically you're not really looking for crit, right? So you come over here, next boss, and this guy is like the one that really drops the most crazy healing item. So this is the best item, in my opinion, by far in the instance for healers, in the whole, all of Dire Maul. This item is probably like one of the best itemized items in the game. It's very similar to Lionheart Helm for healers, essentially. Now, obviously, the impact it's going to have can't be the same as Lionheart Helm, but like that's how well itemized it is. It's just absolutely incredible for any healer, and it's absolutely worth a pickup. Has a pretty decent drop rate, so it's not like pulling your teeth, although the instance can be a bit annoying at times. But yeah, it's just absolutely insane item. Not much else to be said. Oh, I want to do a comparison to this item, and I'll do it in the other video I make specifically about this. But let's look at it compared to Priest Tier 2, okay? So 42 healing, 6 mana, 20 int, okay? Let's go to Molten Core, Ragnaros. Okay, 21 int, 7 mana, so 1 more int, 1 more mana per 5, and 46 healing, so we're dropping like 4 healing, okay? And we're losing 21 spirit, but keep in mind that the spirit is not that great at this point in the game, right? Because we don't have 3-piece tier 2. So especially at this particular point in the game, this item is amazing. It's basically like having your tier 2 legs. Like, you don't have to really worry about getting your tier 2 legs. And the nice thing about this item is that the tier 2 legs become more important once 3-piece is in the game, because then which items you're equipping to get the set bonus matters a lot, right? And these items, or this leg set right here is like very good. It's a very good piece of the Priest tier 2, basically, right? So you want this to be one of the items you're using. So you do want Priest tier 2 legs. Don't make any mistakes about it, right? But until the 3 set comes out, it's really not that important to have the legs, right? So using the DM legs from West here, right, to fill in until you actually get those tier 2 legs is more than fine. Like, they're basically the same item. The only benefit you're getting from the tier 2 legs is the fact that they enable the 3-piece set bonus, and they're a very strong item. Like, one of the things in this game is when you're trying to get good set bonuses, sometimes you have to sacrifice item strength to get the bonus, and that's not really the case, at least any time in the near future with the tier 2 pants. Like, the tier 2 pants are just really good pants, and they enable the set bonus. So that's why they're so good. But just 1-for-1 without the set bonus, they're very comparable to Padres. So that's why that item's insanely good, and obviously it's good on all the other healers as well. Now, items from here, this item's like decent, obviously, if you just have nothing, but not really good outside of that. And then Mind Tap Talisman. So 11 mana per 5 seconds is pretty good. It's very similar to Shard of Scale. Shard of Scale is 16, right? So you're only losing 4 mana per 5, and that's like a super rare item. These are your best trinkets, I think. In terms of if you would want to use... they're also not unique, if you notice. So you can run 2 of these. They're a little bit annoying to get. As you see, the drop rate is kind of low. But they are probably the best trinket you can run on Priest specifically. I feel like on Shaman, things get a bit more blurred because Chain Heal, you know, you're going to be spamming it almost all the time. And it does have a fantastic spell power, or healing power coefficient, right? So obviously it makes you naturally want to lean into healing power a little bit more. But for Priests, where the healing power on the trinkets are already kind of mid, right? And then on top of that, you don't really benefit from the healing power that much because of how the spell coefficients tend to work and what you tend to be casting in Raid. These trinkets are actually very, very powerful. Now, the thing is, if we go to the books section, right, and we click on this, it shows us what the Priest trinket is. So this is something that you will probably have access to because these books just drop like anywhere in DM, basically. And eventually you'll probably get this, and this is actually a very good item for Maul Core because it has the fire resistance, right, which is really good. It has the 4 mana per 5, and it has the 33 healing power. So this, in my opinion, is pretty much equivalent to one of those, like one of these items, one of these Mind Taps. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be bothering to get 2 Mind Taps on my main. I'll probably just use 1 Mind Tap and then the Priest trinket. There's also the option where if you ever do get Shard of Scale, obviously, you can either replace the Mind Tap with it or you can go Mind Tap and Shard of Scale, right? So Priest actually gets a lot of good trinkets at this point, and I think definitely against a boss that does any type of fire damage that I'm concerned about, I would prefer to have the Priest class trinket. But outside of that, this is a really strong trinket, and it's kind of hard to get 2 of them, but it's not. They're obviously strong if you do, right? So just something to keep in mind there. And yeah, that's the main item from there. This is just a crit item, right? Nothing insane here. Here, this is the Cloak of the Cosmos, and we talked about this in the prior video. This is the alternative to Hide of the Wild, in my opinion, is probably what you should be getting in most cases. It's just basically Hide of the Wild minus 16 healing, and you save like 800 gold, probably more, by the time this video gets released. So obviously just a really good item, has a really good drop rate, and I believe this boss drops 2 things. So it's super easy to pick this up. Other notable things, this item is like okay. The thing about it that kind of stinks is that obviously it's just strictly worse than the belt we showed in Dire Maul East. But again, it could be something where, you know, you have just a really bad belt on like a leather or higher user, and this is kind of like a decent option to just snag, obviously. And then we have Robes of the Everlasting Knight. Personally, I don't think that the intellect value on this is high enough to justify the healing loss when you compare this to the strat robe, but this is obviously really nice just for like a farming spec, right? Shadow farming spec, so something to keep in mind there. And another item for shadow farming spec, right? So decent item there. And then we'll get into the last boss here. So this item, or sorry, this boss has some decent items. Like this chest on Druid is again like kind of okay, but it's just not better than the strat chest in my opinion. Then you have things like this, which are very mediocre in my opinion, especially with the Padre's legs being in the game. The Emerald Flame Ring is quite good for what it is. I mean, it has a decent intellect value, right, with a decent plus healing value. So this is a very good option for, you know, if you don't have other rings. I think if I were to compare this to the item from DM East, right, the other ring there, the 10 int 6 MP5 one, I almost tend to prefer the MP5 one. But if you're a shaman, or if you just prefer healing power, this is an absolute fine substitute. Most of these items are very interchangeable, and I wouldn't really worry too much about getting one over the other. It's more like once you get both, then you're kind of wondering which one to use. But I wouldn't like run this place explicitly for this if you had other decent options, right? And this item is actually kind of decent. 8 intellect with 12 healing on the base. So this, in my opinion, is just better than the other item that we had at the end of Dire Maul East, just because it has more intellect, very similar heal value. The problem is it's a sword. So this is basically just like a paladin weapon. I don't even think shamans can use swords, right? Maybe they can. But yeah, not a weapon that priests can use, which is kind of unfortunate. And yeah, that's pretty much everything from Dire Maul West. So Dire Maul West is probably like the best because it has Mind Tap Talisman and it has the pants from this boss, Padre's Trousers. It's the best healer instance, in my opinion, of the 3 wings of Dire Maul. And we will move on. We'll just actually check the trash here. Nothing super special, just to show you guys, right? And yeah, so we will go to Dire Maul North. Okay. So the main thing for this boss is these Sublime Wrist Guards. Before this, you didn't have access to any wrists that had any sort of healing power on it, pre-bis wise, right? And this does. So, you know, I think this is similar in value to Magic Skull Bracers. Like, I don't really value 12 healing that high, especially on Priest. It's better on Shaman, obviously. I think on Priest, I might actually even prefer Magic Skull to these, but I mean, obviously, these are free and easy to get for the most part. So it says 5% drop rate here, but I swear that they drop more than that for me. But they also drop from multiple bosses, I think, so that's part of the deal, is that you're more likely to see them if you kind of do the things. Now, keep in mind, if you're doing tribute runs, not all of these guards can be slain, right? So that's just something you may have to look for when you're doing runs in this instance. But yeah, these are definitely decent if you come across them, but they're not, like, stand out better, in my opinion, than the other Pre-Bis bracers. Nothing else to really see here, right? These are actually not terrible if you don't have the Skullomance things on Shaman, but, you know, Skullomance ones on Shaman are just better. This is very bad. You don't want minus 10 intellect. Don't use this. And let's see. I don't think there's anything else novel on this. And basically the same items. Double checking. This is the cache for all the things. This is the Height of the Wild recipe. And then Boots of the Full Moon. So these are probably the best Pre-Bis healing boots in the game, technically speaking. personally, I still prefer the ones from UBRS because it's 16 intellect. I believe it's like 18 or 20 healing. So you're basically losing like no healing and you get fire resistance. So I think obviously in a case like that, it's just better to pick up the fire resistance in the event that it could potentially help you, right? But these are also a great alternative option. So definitely be on the lookout for them. And going into Choash the Observer, this is a decent shield for Shaman. Honestly, it's, not bad in terms of just pure intellect. Good PvP shield especially. Nothing too crazy though. There's also another similar shield, I think, with like 15 int from LBRS, so nothing crazy. This is definitely a good wand option for Priest. In terms of like what you're going to be using as an alternative, you have to kind of think. A lot of people are probably using like 6 intellect wands, and I think I would take the 4 mana per 5 over the 6 intellect wand pretty much any day of the week. When you upgrade to maybe Crimson Chakra or something like that, then maybe that's a little bit better. Again, it kind of depends. If you're going to be remaxing your mana every fight, then Intellect Wand is very equivalent to this. But if you're not going to be remaxing your mana, if you're going to be doing like a speedrun type thing, then this becomes obviously even better. So this is something that you're probably going to be one of the only people rolling on this. And it's kind of like a decent wand just to kill stuff with anyway. So if this drops, not a bad thing to roll on, but I wouldn't like go out of my way to target it. I'm not doing runs on DM North to target this, obviously. And this item right here, this Insightful Hood, this one is actually very, very good, but obviously it's kind of only for like leather users, right? So, or leather or plate or mail, leather and above. This is a kind of like an insane item, I would say, like 30-some healing with 1% crit, and 15 intellect still is really, really nice. It even has the 9 spirit on there for druid. Not so great for shaman, but the 9 spirit part at least. But very, very solid item overall, and definitely a good item if your class can use it. Unfortunately, priest cannot use this, so can't really make a big deal about it for priest, but just a very good item overall. And then coming into the final boss, King Gordok. Now, King Gordok has normal drops, and he has tribute drops as well. So we'll go over the tribute drops in a moment. But basically for the normal drops, these are quite good for druids especially. Because shamans have a 33 healing bracer that druid cannot access because it's male, and priest cannot access these. So these are obviously good for druid. But they're also good for shaman or paladin or whatever if you can't get the other bracers. This helm is like, again, just not super great because we're not really valuing crit that much. These are the gloves that are like BIS basically for any male or above user, so paladin and shaman. I think it is worth getting these because, especially on shaman at least, because shaman, the plus healing is like just very, very strong for them. If you had the gloves from DM East, and this was the only thing you needed out of DM North, I probably wouldn't bother to run it until I got them. But they are technically Bis, and they're particularly good on Shaman just because of how much of the plus healing you actually get to use, right? So go down here, and this is the only other really healing item from the normal loot pool. It's definitely pretty good for an offhand healing-wise, right? I tend to just prefer the stabs in most cases, but comparing something like this, or using something like this rather, with like the item that you saw from the first instance, DM East, where it's 5 intellect and like 14 spell power, or you can use the Hammer of Grace, which is another 30 healing. You definitely get a decent chunk of healing out of your weapons using this, so it's not something that's bad. I just personally don't use it. As a priest, as a shaman, again, this is something that you may want to look into, as plus healing is just way better on shaman than it is on priest for the most part. So yeah, that's pretty much all the items, and then we'll go into the tribute items. So these are the items from the chest. You have to do a special type of run. We're not going to cover how to do that here. It's a little out of the scope of the video, but we'll just go through some of the items. This item is like kind of decent if you have nothing else, but again, just the item from Strat Live is so good, and it's so easy to get compared to this. A lot of people aren't running tribute runs. Like, a lot of times a hunter will just do a tribute run, and he's not really usually selling, like, this item. I mean, maybe, you could join a hunter, the group of a hunter doing this, but then you have to, like, use invis pots to stealth to get in range to be able to get the drop, stuff like that, right? So I think just acquiring this is a bit more of a pain in most cases than it's worth, while also being inferior to other options, like the Stratholme option. So just not super big on that chest. Nothing really that great here, right? And yeah, nothing that great here. And then Rod of the Ogre Magi, this item is like okay, it's like kind of like a mix between a lot of the other items we had. It's kind of like Jack of all trades, master of none, and I tend not to like that. But it's definitely not a bad staff if you have like nothing else, So if you're doing a tribute, this drops, and you're a really undergeared healer, definitely worth picking up. But I would probably give it to a mage or something, over me, like a caster TPS. I'm not super concerned about something like that. Not really that great. I'm just kind of double checking on some of these things. These are actually kind of interesting. It's just the fact that, obviously the Padres legs exist, and they have 40-some healing on them, and very similar amount of MP5 and same int. So they kind of outclass them, but if you got these before Padres, I'd use them, obviously. And that is basically the Dire Maul in a nutshell. I may make a specific video on the class trinkets, but basically what you do is you can just find this book from the dungeon from killing mobs, or I think it's on the floor sometimes. There's books on the floor. Sometimes they open into items, sometimes they don't. But you basically just either find it that way, or you can buy it off the auction house, because it can be sold there, and you just turn it in to somebody in, I believe it is DM West, and at the end of the instance, and yeah, you get the trinket. So that's basically how that works, and like I said, it's a very strong trinket. I would definitely recommend you do that. It might be kind of expensive early on, so don't worry about getting it right away. It's not a make or break item, but once the price starts to come down, I would definitely add this to my trinket repertoire, right? So yeah, that's basically DM in a nutshell, and all the items you're looking out for as a healer. One last thing I'll mention, and I might make a separate video about this, is that this Librum of Focus, it's 8+8 to healing and damage for your head and leg slot. Some people prefer this over the 150 mana enchant. I do not. I think it's like strictly worse in almost all cases. So just something to note there. But yeah, I don't like this item at all. So yeah, I might make a separate video comparing the two. But until then, thank you very much for watching. If you found this helpful, useful, if you liked it, please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.